let's run through a checklist. These are some indicators of material weaknesses in internal control, some things to watch out for if you are the auditor. Again, kind of think of this like a checklist, assess the risk in each of these parts to see if there may be material weaknesses in internal control. Well, first off, we have identification of fraud, whether or not material on the part of senior management. We discussed this in other lessons as well, where even if you have immaterial fraud on the part of management, that is going to be a massive issue because it's indicative of possibly greater concerns. If management, the ones who are supposed to be running the company, the ones who have probably the most authority over the company, other than the board of directors, if they are committing even immaterial fraud, it shows that they have poor character. Now, that's obviously indicative of there could be more material weaknesses in internal control. Restatement of previously issued financial statements to reflect the correction of a material misstatement due to error or fraud. If there are just constantly, whether it's errors or fraud, if you're constantly restating financial statements because of that, again, it doesn't matter if it's error or fraud, it's just that internal controls are not operating effectively. If in a perfect world, internal controls would operate perfectly, you wouldn't need an auditor, you wouldn't have to restate anything, there would just be no issues. If you have to keep reissuing this because you keep finding errors, that is indicative of possible material weakness in controls. Identification by the auditor of a material misstatement of the financial statements in circumstances that indicate that misstatement would not have been detected by the entity's internal control. If you see something that just got through, you're auditing the financial statements and some issue got through, that would be indicative of some weakness in internal control. And then lastly, ineffective oversight of the entity's financial reporting and internal control by those charged with governance. So similar, you see issues on the part of senior management, you see issues on the part of the board of directors. That would be an indicator of a possible material weakness. Deficiencies, which are not material weaknesses, so just issues, right, that are not material weaknesses. If the auditor determines that a deficiency or combination of those is not a material weakness, the auditor should consider whether prudent officials, so this is, and I would just say like whether it's regulators or anyone else coming in and auditing, hey, would a coworker consider this an issue? Having knowledge of the same facts and circumstances would likely reach the same conclusion. So again, if you see an issue, and this is anything when it comes to materiality or anything in the audit, take a step back. Whenever you find an issue, you think of something, whenever you're using professional judgment, you want to take a step back and say, would someone else, would another auditor, and you could maybe even ask that person, you bring in, someone else working on your team, say, hey, I determined that this issue is not a material weakness. What do you think? And you give it to them and you don't even tell them any context, right? You have them come to the conclusion by themselves so they can kind of determine if they come to the same conclusion as you. Now, prudent officials, right? Any regulators, anyone like that, making sure that it's kind of like, hey, if you're preparing the taxes for someone, what would the IRS think? You're trying to think, what would the IRS want me to do here? Moving along to deficiencies that are going to be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Now, any of these, I'll just interchangeably say issues. That's my colloquial way of just referring to deficiencies without saying this word a million times. And any issues identified during the audit that, upon evaluation, with the auditors using their professional judgment, determined to be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses under this section, this is as the AICPA is covering the topic, should be communicated in writing to management and those charged with governance as a part of each audit, including significant deficiencies and material weaknesses that were communicated to management and those charged with governance in previous audits and have not been remediated. Now, what has happened here, if they haven't been addressed and haven't been fixed, if they were communicated, you kind of need to say, hey, everyone, these were issues in the past. Here they still are. That please essentially just please address them. Now, significant deficiencies and material weaknesses that were previously communicated and have not yet been remediated may be communicated in writing by referring to the previously issued written communication and the date of that communication. It's kind of like when you just forward an email to someone and you're saying, hey, just following up on this, and you're politely just trying to say, come on, man, just respond back to me. It's been a bit, right? Just following up with a client, something like that. So similar sort of process there. That is going to be how we deal with communication. We'll talk about communication a little bit more as it relates to these issues as we are going along this lesson. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because Who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.